week on Raceweek, it's time to recap the first half of the season on the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour. Mighty Mike Stefanik gets off to a tough start in his quest for a second title. And the Reg thinks he's on a roll till this occurs during the start of 1990. And they said this man would be a sleeper on the Modified Tour. This is the oldest division in NASCAR today. They say it is the fastest and most exciting open-wheel division that NASCAR has to offer. The NASCAR Winston Modified Tour. Hello, I'm Ben Dodge, and I welcome you to yet another edition of Race Week. Well, in this edition of Race Week, we're taking a look at the first half of the season of the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour. We're coming to you from Fine Line Speed and Fabrication in Stafford Springs, Connecticut. And the car that I'm leaning up next to is a NASCAR Modified Tour car without all of the components in the body. It's one tough piece of equipment. And just like the equipment, it takes one tough customer, a good driver, and a good team to get the job done. Well, at the start of the 1990 season, everyone had their hopes of becoming the champion of the NASCAR Modified Tour. A lot of the experts felt that they knew who the champion would be. But as 1990 began, the excitement developed. And right from the start, it would be a battle to the finish. 1990 began at the Martinsville Speedway for the men of the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour. Event number one began with great enthusiasm at the Martinsville Speedway. It was Jan Leedy who'd be starting on the outside of the front row. Remember, he was the defending regional champion. The field was set. Defending Modified Tour champion would be challenging on the inside. Ricky Fuller was not far behind when things got bobbled up a bit as Tom Bowles dropped off the pace. But the action was now towards the front of the field when Tony Jankowiak would slam the wall. It was Brian Ross and Tom Baldwin would come together at the entrance of pit road. But back towards the front of the field, it was Jeff Fuller who was showing enough steam as he was challenging the 15 of Mighty Mike Stefanik. A battle of the red cars when Tommy Bowles would drop off the pace just a bit, sending everyone down to the pit area for a mandatory pit stop. The heavy hitters were in. The red just fueled up and left the pits, and so didn't Jeff Fuller. Mighty Mike Stefanik was looking for tires, but when the field went back to green, they were slicing and dicing, and the Reg was a little bit out of shape with car number 44. Off the turn, they were all bobbled up. When things got tangled together, it was Stefanik who suffered the worst of the wear here. Stefanik would not return to the competition, but for other front runners, like Jeff Fuller, the leader of the field, he'd be forced to go to the pits. A Nerf bar dangler would tell the story here. And for the Reg, it was minimum sheet metal damage was the story on the Magnum number 44. But back towards the front of the field, it was the Jet who took command. Jamie the Jet Tomato was holding on, but the Reg was on a roll, trying to make up some valuable time. Jeff Fuller was also threading the needle when suddenly a mix-up would occur. Satch Worley would go around, and so wouldn't Doug Heveron. It was the Reg who was now hunted down in the closing lap by Jeff Fuller. Reggie Ruggiero was looking for victory, but Jeff Fuller had been there before, and he too was starting to move in. But it was the Reg who dominated event number one from the Martinsville Speedway. Round number two came back in the heart of New England at the Thompson International Speedway. The men of the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour were ready to take on the challenge of the 5/8 mile facility. It was Ricky Fuller to the inside of Mighty Mike Stefanik as the field went to green. Horsepower determined who was up front for a while, then Stefanik dropped off the pace with a mechanical problem with car number 15. Ricky Fuller was also a factor early when a flat right front tire would tell the story. Then a tire would blow on the Reg as car number 44 had slammed the wall hard. It was the Reg who was out of the competition here. The Magnum 44 would show the worst of the wear. It was Hirschman in command, but the battle was for second. Tomato was moving in, but Hirschman would set in the winner's circle. Tires would be the story in event number two.
I think part that most guys went with too soft the tires, and after a few laps the tires just give up, and they were just riding. They knew they had to save their tires, to get to the end, and I think that's what part of the problem was.
The biggest modified tour event of 1990 was held at Richmond International Raceway. The 3/4-mile facility hosted the biggest payday in the history of modified racing. And the open-wheel modifieds were ready to take on the challenge. Right from the start, this event turned into a real screamer. It was Mighty Mike Stefanik who'd be dominating the racing action up front. George Kent would run strong the challenge, and Mikey Winitzko would definitely become a factor. When the Reg, his tire problem would continue as he'd blow another tire on car number 44. But back towards the front of the field, it was Magic Shoes in command. But Hirschman would put car number 1 to the front of the field, but it was Ricky Fuller who'd come on like gangbusters to take over the number 1 spot. Once Fuller got in command of the event, Hirschman would reel him in, and McLaughlin was using the draft to his advantage. Off from turn number 4, as they worked to the line, Hirschman's car would bobble and get out of shape as Hirschman would slam the wall hard. It was Doug Heveron who was also involved in the mix-up, but for Hirschman, he'd suffer severe injuries which would perhaps cost him the title in 1990. But once back to green, it was Ricky Fuller, the man who dominated the racing action to win his first modified tour event of 1990. The chase number 77 was in for the biggest payday of the 1990 modified season. Event number 4 took place, and it's called the greatest race in the history of spring at the Stafford Motor Speedway. In Stafford Springs, Connecticut, the modifieds were ready for the Spring Sizzler. Mike McLaughlin and George Kent were making up the front row as the field initially went to green. There was a full house to witness the modifieds, and the Reg looked like a shoo-in for a while as he worked his way and diced it up with Mike McLaughlin for position number 1. It was 2 Sherwood cars that kept the fans on the edge of their seats in anticipation. Further back in the pack, there's another battle that was going on when Mikey Winitzko and Tony Hirschman would come together. A pirouette of spins, then it was Ted Christopher who hand grenade into the Armco retaining wall. Red flag situation would come out for tragedy in turn 1. Tony Jankaliak had struck the wall hard and would lose his life at the Stafford Motor Speedway. As the field went back to green, it was the Reg in command. Brian Ross was moving in, and Mike Stefanik was also a factor. Further back in the pack, Doug Walcott and George Kent were dicing it up, but it was the Reg in command. Mighty Mike Stefanik was trying to hold on when suddenly the Reg would spin to the bottom of the racetrack. Guess what? Another tire cut on car number 44. But it was Mighty Mike Stefanik who was the driving force up front when Mike McLaughlin would work him over. Closing laps of the event, this made the fans really love the competition. It was a 5-car battle right to the checker, but it was Mighty Mike Stefanik back in the winner's circle. A purse in excess of $8,000 went to the winner, Mike Stefanik.
Hanging on is a good way to sum it up. We were hanging on at the end there. Mike was quicker. Reggie was fast all day. Sometimes not always the fastest car wins, obviously. But we're just happy to break our jinx and just get off to a good start and just have a good run. And now, hopefully, the troops will be pumped to go to March.
After 4 events on the NASCAR Modified Tour, it was Jamie the Jet Tomato leading with 6:45. Ricky Fuller was running in second after a big victory at the Richmond Speedway. Satch Worley was third, George Kent was fourth, and Tommy Bowles would round out the top 5. 6th through 10th for the Modified Tour saw Tony Hirschman just ahead of Reggie Ruggiero with Jeff Fuller, Doug Heveron, and Charlie Rudolph. The defending champion, Mike Stefanik, is back in the winner's circle for the first time on the NASCAR Modified Tour for 1990. Well, next we'll be taking another commercial break, and when we come back, we'll be taking a look, as Mike Stefanik might have won the greatest race in the history of spring, but at this point in the season, he's not even in the top 10 in the points. We'll take a look at that and much, much more on the NASCAR Modified Tour right after this. Coming at you, the World Series of Asphalt Stock Car Racing. Daytona Speedweek's 1991 from the New Smyrna Speedway. February 8th through 16th. 9 exciting nights of competition. The fastest, most exciting half mile in the country, offering several divisions of competition. The real excitement of the NASCAR Tour Type Modifieds with top New England drivers, plus mini modifieds, limited late models, and much, much more. Plus ASA All-Pro drivers, Midwest versus the South. Only at the New Smyrna Speedway, February 8th through 16th.
Racing is more fun when you know the
Welcome back to Race Week. Well, now it's time to go back to the Martinsville Speedway. Now, here's this setup. Jamie DeMano is leading in the point parade, and Ricky Fuller is running in second. Mike Stefanik isn't in the top 10 yet, and the Reg, well, he hasn't been exactly on a roll at this point in the season. Let's pick up things where we left off from the Martinsville Speedway. The return visit to the half-mile facility in Martinsville, Virginia, saw Jeff Fuller and Mikey Winitsko starting right up front. Remember, both of them have won before at the Martinsville Speedway. But right from the start, it was Jeff Fuller who took command of things as he was dominating the racing action up front. But there was still a good battle already starting to shape up. Mikey Winitsko was hunted down for a while, then Mike Stefanik went on by. In the pit area, Tony Hirschman, recovering from that injury from Richmond, would have Jan Leedy get in the car as a backup driver. Leedy would work his way back to contend, but wouldn't really become a factor. Then Tommy Bowles would take it in deeper than most, get a little bit out of shape, as Jamie the Jet Tomato would go spinning. Also involved in the mix-up was Jay Hedgecock and Ricky Fuller. Back towards the front of the field, a battle shaping up when Mikey Winitsko made contact with Jamie the Jet, sending the Jet around in turn number 3. The big battle was still occurring for the lead. Jeff Fuller was dominating the racing action and would hold on to take down another impressive victory from Martinsville Speedway. The victory is worth $6,400. He led from start to finish from Martinsville Speedway. Event number 6 on the NASCAR Modified Tour was back in New England at the Stafford Motor Speedway. This would be the first night event after a 3-week layoff for the NASCAR Modified Tour. And some of the drivers would tell us exactly what they did during the layoff.
We did do some more racing at some bull rings to get ready for up-and-coming bull rings. You know, we call the bull rings little tracks, quarter miles, third of a miles. So we got a lot of them coming up, so I'm trying to get prepared for them.
We worked real hard on getting a new car done. Probably bring it to Thompson next week if I get a motor for it, but the car is really pretty much race ready, less motor, and that makes me feel a lot better when I walk in the garage and see 2 race cars sitting there ready, you know, basically ready to go into service at any time they need to be. That makes the team stronger. It makes my job easier going into the month of June with 5 races backed right up.
No, we don't do anything different. We were racing everywhere else, you know, that we can, and come here, race tonight, race tomorrow, race Sunday, so we're just racers.
This was the Connecticut Classic 100 for the Modified Tour drivers. And it was Jeff Fuller who'd take advantage of things in the start. Brother Rick was right behind him. And Tony Hirschman was also a factor in the early competition. Pretty wide was the story. Mike Stefanik was making the bottom work for him with car number 15. And the Reg wasn't letting either one of them get far out of his sight, kicking up some dust with car number 44. It was the Reds down underneath Winitsko. And down the back straightaway, Charlie Rudolph would end up on his roof and go sliding with car number 72, the ADAP Auto Parts machine. This would bring out a red flag situation. But once back to green, it was Tom Bowles and Mike Stefanik who were coming on strong as they were threading the needle to get to the front of the field. Rick Fuller was also a big factor when the Reds would have more problems and slide through the center of the infield with car number 44. Back-to-back victories would be the story for Jeff Fuller, who would secure another win from the Stafford Motor Speedway. The NASCAR Modified Tour would move to the Thompson International Speedway for a 150-lap event. The Modified Tour regulars were ready as the field was set for the competition. It was Eddie DeHunt who would be starting right up front with Jeff Fuller, who challenged on the outside. Initially from the start, it was DeHunt who would run strong for a while. Then Mike McLaughlin would find some magic on the inside. Ricky Fuller would also be a factor, and Mighty Mike Stefanik ran this event well. It was Jeff Fuller who was also looking for some steam on the bottom. They'd run closer than most people parked, but still the battle was on. And Stefanik wouldn't give up any extra racing room on the racetrack. Trouble would develop as a couple of cars would get out of shape. It was car number 48, Doug Walcott, who would go spinning. Back down on pit road, it was Jamie the Jet Tomato, who would have suspension damage. His right side would be the story on car number 2. Ricky Fuller got tangled up with brother Jeff Fuller initially on the restart, as Ed DeHunt would also become a factor, and Mikey Winitsko was now driving car number 69. Down the back straightaway, Bruce D'Alessandro would have a problem and drop off the pace with car number 90. Then suddenly contact was made. Charlie Rudolph had no place to go. S.J. Avanti would also be involved, and down on pit road, this story was being told for tires and fuel. Mike Stefanik led the charge. Mike McLaughlin was still the man who was dominating the racing action up front. But Ricky Fuller was working him over. Then suddenly the two would make contact. McLaughlin would go around. Fuller would maintain the lead. Then it was Doug Heveron who was involved in the mix-up. The Reds, Jeff Fuller and George Kent. Back to the front of the field, Mike Stefanik had taken things over. It was a battle of the mics. Right down to the wire. Mike Stefanik would impressively hold on as Mike McLaughlin would finish in the runner-up spot. The NASCAR Modified Tour would next move to the high banks of the Monadnock Motor Raceway. 150 laps would tell the story in this event. George Kent and Doug Heveron making up the front row. Ricky Fuller not far behind in that third row with Jamie the Jet Tomato. As the field would go to green, you could almost anticipate what was going to happen soon. Good challenge was shaping up. The Reg, who runs there regular, was trying to get to the front of the field. It was then a challenge for the lead when Eddie DeHunt would get crossed up in the middle of the pack, and that would send a mad scramble. Mike Stefanik was stuck on the outside. Then it was Jeff Fuller who was trying to make the bottom lane work. Couldn't quite do it, and contact was almost made. The Reg was picking him off one at a time, when suddenly it was DeHunt who would spin. Satch Worley would be involved, Larry Moore also, and John Hoffman with car number 11. Back towards the front of the field, George Kent was still doing a fine job of setting the pace. Ricky Fuller was still in second. Then it was Hirschman with some help who would go spinning with car number 1. George Kent's impressive lead had suddenly vanished. Ricky Fuller was trying to take command of things. The Reg wasn't far behind. Fuller got bounced around a bit. Hirschman, Tom Baldwin also factors in the competition here. But it was still George Kent in command when Jamie Tomato decided to make the outside lane work. Tom Bowles would try to fight back, but couldn't muscle up enough steam this time. Then it was the Reg who worked his way to the outside, dropping George Kent back to position number 2. Jamie the Jet was also running very, very strong as a factor as he would run to the outside and battle for the third spot. Ricky Fuller get crossed up. Mikey Winitsko down through the infield. He'd lose almost a position as they'd head back to the turn. Tom Baldwin was a factor when suddenly Jeff Fuller would spin. Doug Heveron would back into him with car number 3. But still the battle was being told for position number 1. The Reg was the leader. Then it was the Jet who'd go to the outside, as the Reg had some type of a problem with car number 44. George Kent had worked his way back to second. Iwanitzko was third. Then it was Ricky Fuller in the 4th spot. Tom Bowles with some help would go around with car number 76. No severe damage done here, but enough to create a problem. But for the Jet, it would be a great day. His first Modified Tour victory at Monadnock Motor Raceway. Jamie the Jet Tomato's point lead was expanding with the victory from the high banks. It was obvious to see that the Jet was happy and pleased. He now set in the number 1 spot after 8 events run on the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour. Tomato would lead with 12:17 over George Kent with 11:75. Then it was Ricky Fuller, Tom Bowles, and Mike Iwanitzko. 6th through 10th on the Modified Tour saw Jeff Fuller in the 6th spot over Doug Heveron. Satch Worley was 8th. Mike Stefanik, the defending champion, was 9th. And Tony Hirschman, after recovering from the injury, was now setting in the 10th spot. It's hard to believe that veteran Modified Tour driver Jamie Tomato has just secured his first Tour victory ever at Monadnock Motor Raceway. Now remember, he leads by 42 points over George Kent at this point in the season. Well, next we'll be taking a commercial break. And when we come back, we'll be visiting such facilities as the Stafford Motor Speedway, the Star Speedway, and a whole lot more right after this. The car you dreamed of owning. It's the car you dreamed of driving. The Eagle Talon is a combination of styling and technology at a very affordable price. Just ask race car driver Tom Bowles of Bowles Jeep Eagle.
Strap yourself into an Eagle Talon at Bowles Jeep Eagle today, and we'll see you in the winner's circle.
There's great college basketball excitement coming your way on your New England Sports Network. We'll put you courtside as the nation's top teams and standout players go head-to-head. With action from the Big East, Southwest, Metro, Big 8, and Pac-10 conferences, NESN is your place to be all season long for the best in college hoop coverage. UCLA, Oregon State, Thursday night at 10:30, live on NESN. Your New England Sports Network has another great college basketball doubleheader coming your way. We travel around the country to bring you the best in college hoop coverage. Tune in Tuesday night for 2 tough conference clashes. Seton Hall and Providence battle live at 8, followed by a Southwest Conference showdown between Houston and Texas A&M at 10, right here on NESN.
Welcome back to Race Week. Well, at this point in the season, the only individuals that have set in victory lane on 2 occasions are Mighty Mike Stefanik and Jeff Fuller. But the competition is getting real heated up. As next, the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour moved to the Holland Speedway. Now, it was the first visit ever for the Modified Tour there. Securing the victory was Tony Hirschman. Finishing in second was the Reg, followed by George Brunhutzel. Then the Modified Tour moved back to the Stafford Motor Speedway. Mike Stefanik was just as hot as he ran the half mile. It was the CarQuest 125 at the Stafford Motor Speedway. Eddie DeHunt would be starting right up front of the competition here with Tony Hirschman. Then it was the Reg and Mike McLaughlin. Stormy right from the start, the stage was set. Into turn number 1, things looked pretty rough for a while. DeHunt would get crossed up. Reggie Ruggiero would be involved. So wouldn't Tommy Bowles, George Kent, and Magic Shoes Mike McLaughlin. McLaughlin was out of the competition, and so wasn't the Reg before lap number 1 would go into the record books. But when it was back to green, it was Ricky Fuller in command. Satch Worley was moving in as a factor, and then it was car number 69 for Mikey Winitzko, who would run strong. And Mighty Mike Stefanik was also on a roll. Tom Baldwin wasn't too far behind. The Jet got bounced around a bit, slide to the infield, he'd be safe. Doug Heveron would also go spinning with car number 3. But the Jet had one thing on his mind, the points in the championship. He'd return to the hunt with car number 2. But back towards the front of the field, what a battle shaping up. Ricky Fuller and Satch Worley duking it out. Jeff Fuller battling with Richie Gallup for position number 3. And Hirschman still wasn't far behind with car number 1. 5 cars under a blanket when down the back straightaway, Satch Worley and Jeff Fuller would come together, sending Fuller around with car number 8. There was a mandatory pit stop on lap number 50. The parade of cars would head to the pits on lap 49 as Rick Fuller would lead the charge.
On lap 50 is when they told us we had to pit. And on lap 49, Michael pitted. He crossed the line in the pits, and that clicked lap 50. The way that we understood the rule was you couldn't pit before lap 50.
When the field went back to green, it was Richie Gallup in command. But Mighty Mike Stefanik and Ricky Fuller had worked their way back to the front of the field. It was Mike Stefanik with pressure on the inside, Rick Fuller waiting in the wings, and Tom Baldwin not far behind. But Mighty Mike Stefanik had now inched into the lead. On a home turf, Stefanik looked almost unstoppable, when suddenly Richie Gallup would get crossed up in front of car number 99 for Richard Savory. Gallup would have to do it from the back of the pack, but it was Mighty Mike Stefanik who would hold on for another victory from the Stafford Motor Speedway.
We had the fresh tires, and that made the difference over Rick Fuller. He run real good, but our fresh tires gave us the edge, even though our front end wasn't as good as it could have been.
The NASCAR Modified Tour moved to Riverhead Raceway in Riverhead, Long Island, New York. They say this is the toughest quarter mile of them all. As Mighty Mike Stefanik and Mikey Winitzko, one of the hometown favorites, was starting in the front row. As the field went to green, it was a battle between red cars for the lead, with Mikey Winitzko dominating the racing action for a while. Tom Baldwin, the veteran, was hunting him down when Bobby Park would get crossed up with car number 19. Park would slide safe to the center of the infield. But back towards the front of the field, it was the Reg who tried to go to the outside when a massive mix-up would occur down the back straightaway. Tony Hirschman was involved, and so wasn't Ricky Fuller. The worst of the wear showed in the sheet metal of the Fuller machine. But back to green, they got crossed up again. Tom Baldwin almost stopped from the racetrack. Jeff Fuller was involved, and it was car number 3 for Heveron back on top of Ricky Fuller with car number 77. More body damage was the story for Fuller. Bob Park was also ready to go back and rejoin the competition. The Fuller car looked more like a super than a modified. And when they went back to green, the Reg got bounced around just a bit. Winitzko did the same, and it was Mike Stefanik who became the star of the show. Tom Baldwin was also running strong when Winitzko was hunted down by Baldwin, with lap cars giving him a problem right to the finish. But Mikey Winitzko would take down the victory. The big 4th of July extravaganza took place at Jennerstown Speedway in Jennerstown, Pennsylvania. Satch Worley would be starting right out front, and Mikey Winitzko would be on the outside. For a while, it looked like Satch Worley would be the star of this show. But it was Jeff Fuller who'd run strong to challenge with car number 8. Fuller was on a roll, and horsepower would decide who had the lead, and it was Jeff Fuller who would take it over with ease. Tony Hirschman was looking to make the same type of move, as he too would become a factor. Mikey Winitzko was not far behind, but Jeff Fuller was the man who was dominating the racing action. Then a tire would go down on the Winitzko machine. Heveron would squeak by with car number 3 while contending among the top 5 cars. George Kemp was involved, Mike Stefanik, and Reggie Ruggiero. It was Jeff Fuller who would then also have a problem with a flat and go spinning. This would give the lead to Doug Heveron. Satch Worley would be involved in this mix-up, so would Ricky Fuller and Bobby Park. Back towards the front of the field, it was Dougie Heveron who was dominating the racing action. Tom Bowles would drop off the pace just a bit. But it was Heveron in for his first Modified Tour victory from the Jennerstown Speedway. Heveron would pick up $6,000 for his first Modified Tour victory. Star Speedway would be the next stop for the Modified Tour. And like the Speedway's name, everybody was looking to be the star of this show. It was George Brunhutzel who had qualified well, who'd be starting right up front with car number 28. Outside of him, it would be the number 1 of Tony Hirschman. The field got underway, and things were a little bit loose. Not much traction at the Star Speedway for a while. Then the Reds found some magic, but Hirschman was just as aggressive in the outside lane. That was the battle for second, as Hirschman was trying to move in to contend with George Brunhutzel. Further back in the pack, it was trouble, as Jamie the Jet Tomato was involved with the mix-up with car number 9 for Eddie DeHunt. Tomato would return to the competition as Mike Stefanik would go to the pit area while the field was under caution. Back towards the front of the field, it was Brunhutzel in command of the event. Not far behind was Tony Hirschman. Hirschman was being pressured heavily by the Reds. DeHunt was a factor, and so was Baldwin. Tony Ferrante would then have a problem, and George Kemp would have a right front tire go flat. It was still George Brunhutzel in command of the event when the Reds made contact with Hirschman. But that didn't scare Hirschman none. He'd apply even more pressure to try to pick up the number 2 spot from Reggie Ruggiero. Tom Baldwin was also a factor, and Stefanik was trying to run back to the front when he'd get out into the loose stuff with car number 15. Good battlescaping up as Ricky Fuller would try to hold on. Rap, tap, tap to the bumper. Several stories were being told here. But it was Hirschman who'd take advantage of things on the outside. Closing laps of the event, it was Hirschman with car number 1 to become the number 1 car on the racetrack. Mighty Mike Stefanik had worked his way back into second. He was crying, but Tony Hirschman was still the star of this show. The Reds were setting in the 3rd spot. 3 cars contending for the lead. Lap traffic would tell the story. Final circuits of competition, heavy braking here, but it was Hirschman into the winner's circle at the Star Speedway. The $5,000 victory would be win number 3, even after an injury, for Tony Hirschman. At the halfway point of the season, with 13 events of 23 completed, it was Jamie Domeno still leading, 1942 over Ricky Fuller. Tony Hirschman was now in the 3rd spot over Mikey Winitzko, and Doug Heveron setting in position number 5. 6 through 10 for the Modified Tour saw George Kent in the 6th spot. Satsworthy was 7th. Mike Stefanik was back in the hunt in the 8th spot. The Reds was 9th, and Jeff Fuller was now in the 10th position. Well, that's going to kind of wrap things up for this edition of Race Week. On the next edition of Race Week, we'll pick up where we left off on the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour as we go to the Riverside Park Speedway in Agawam, Massachusetts. Now, remember, Riverside Park is Reggie Ruggiero's home playground, and he is a previous winner of this event. He'll be tough to beat as the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour will continue on the next edition of Race Week. Until then, we say take care and have a Happy New Year. We'll see you next time for the best in motorsports. To move in the major fall events. And the Reg thinks he's back on a roll as he looks to get back on top of things. And Mike McLaughlin shows that one champ can teach another champ new things. Is flying at the front of the field as he sets the pace in the point parade on the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour by 72 points. Ricky Fuller is moving in, and that's what this edition of Race Week is all about as we take a look at the second half of the season on the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour. Hello, I'm Ben Dodge, and I welcome you to yet another edition of Race Week. Well, in this edition of Race Week, we're right back here at Fine Line Speed and Fabrication, and we're about to take a look at the second half of the season on the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour. The second half will feature the short tracks. For some, it'll be the toughest stops, but for others, it'll be home turf. Reggie Ruggiero is running 9th in the point parade, you remember from the last edition of Race Week. But Riverside Park Speedway, the next stop, is where the Reg seems to run best. He's a previous winner of this event. Will he make it 2 years in a row? Well, let's take a look as the Reg looks to move up in the point standings as Tomato looks like a shot for the title on the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour. Just into the heat of the summer, the NASCAR Modified Tour set its sights on the Riverside Park Speedway. This Modified Tour stop was one of the favorites for the competitors, and the front-running cars of the Modified Tour were looking to show their stuff on the short tracks. It was Jeff Fuller starting in the front row with local favorite Richie Gallup, Mikey Winitsko, and the Reg that they say literally owns this racetrack. When the field went to green, they were diced up as they head down the back straightaway. It was Gallup who was being pressured heavily by Mighty Mike Stefanik. Then suddenly Eddie DeHunt would go spinning. Jerry Marquis would be involved, and so would George Brunhustle, but the worst of the wear was Tommy Bull. Back to green, it was a battle among the top cars with Mighty Mike Stefanik taking over position number 1. Jeff Fuller would try to fight back, but the Reg would work his way to the front, but Mike McLaughlin would become a sudden factor. McLaughlin would work the inside lane well, bobble just a bit, and fight back as he would try to take over position number 1. They'd be evenly matched when suddenly it was McLaughlin who would go spinning. It was now Mighty Mike Stefanik in command for a while, then the Reg moved to the front of the class. Reggie Ruggiero was on a roll on the bottom, and the second Sherwood car had surfaced to the top of the class. It was now the Reg in command. Stefanik was running in second, and Mike McLaughlin was not far behind. But the final circuit would tell the story. Lap traffic would be heavy. Rap, tap, tap to the bumper, but it was the Reg in the winner's circle once again. This would be Reggie Ruggerio's second win of the season, the first coming right at the start of 1990. Next, the Modified Tour moved to the Riverhead Raceway for the month of August. The competition was just as hot and steamy there. It was Satch Worley and Mikey Winitsko making up the front row when the field would go to green. Early contender of the competition saw Winitsko at the front of the field, but it didn't take long for the Reg to battle with Tom Baldwin to try to take over position number 1. The two would duke it out lap after lap, but finally the Reds would muscle up enough steam to take over the number 1 spot. But for the point leader, Jamie Tomato, it was a problem. Heavy smoke from the automobile would not end his day, but he would not be a factor here. But Ruggiero and Baldwin still duked it out until the Reg took over position number 1. The Reg, once in command, would start to string it out a bit when down the back straightaway, local racing legend Fred Habach would end up on his roof with car number X89. But back to green, it was Baldwin's last chance to take a shot at position number 1. But the Reg wouldn't falter as George Kemp would get stuck on the outside and tag the ball with car number 21. Final circuit would tell the story. Mike Stefanik was now working his way to the front of the field as he too was contending for a top position as he'd sneak his way into position number 2. It was Hirschman who'd have a problem with the left front tire and a broken tie rod on car number 1, looking to ride it out for the points. But it was Reggie Ruggiero into the winner's circle for the 3rd time.
Well, I'll tell you, they say when you're hot, but I don't know. This team, we've been plugging all year, you know, just trying our hardest. Things haven't gone our way at the beginning. First race, it was beautiful. We won Martinsville. Then it was just downhill ever since.
Next, the NASCAR Modified Tour moved to the 5/8 mile Thompson International Speedway. It was a qualifying race for the R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company Winston 300. And Tom Baldwin surprised a lot of folks by starting in the number 1 spot with car number 7. Magic Shoes was to the outside, then heavy hitters Mike Stefanik along with Tony Hirschman were making up row number 2. For a while, it looked like the main factor of the event would be Mike McLaughlin. As he would thread the needle to the outside, Ricky Fuller would rim ride just a bit, and Hirschman would sneak his way into second. Brad Igella would go spinning down the back straightaway, and Richard Savory would tag the wall with car number 91. A parade of cars for the mandatory pit stop. All the heavy hitters were in. Back to the front of the field, a shuffle of the deck. Doug Walcott was in command for a short time, then suddenly the Reds would get crossed out of shape. Eddie DeHunt would be involved, and so wouldn't Tommy Bowles. But back to the front of the class, it was Mike McLaughlin contending for second. Not far behind was Mighty Mike Stefanik, and the point leader, Jamie the Jet Tomato, was also on a roll. It was Satch Worley who led for a long time, so Mike McLaughlin shot on by in the closing laps of the event. It was McLaughlin who dominated the racing action, but the Reg had worked his way back to second as they'd head to the checker. This was McLaughlin's first Modified Tour victory of 1990.
And I run just quick enough where Satch, he could get under me, but he couldn't really do nothing with me. And then they said Reggie was coming, so I figured I'd wait until he got there, and that's when I give it, you know, what was left.
The NASCAR Modified Tour moved to the Riverside Park Speedway for a twin billing of the ADAP Busch Grand National and Modified Tour twin events. The The field was set to go to green when Ricky Fuller would falter a bit on the inside lane. That would create havoc further back in the pack, as that would shuffle things up quite a bit. But back towards the front of the field, it was Fuller in command. Iwanitsko would move in as a factor when suddenly the Reg and Iwanitsko would come together. As Ruggiero would go around, the field would scramble. A chain reaction occurred on the outside. But it was now Richie Gallup, the regular runner at Riverside Park, who snuck in and worked his way to position number 1. Jeff Fuller was not going to let brother Rick Fuller get far out of his side. It was a battle in the inside lane, and Richie Gallup was leading the charge. Jeff Fuller was now running in second, and Tom Bowles was setting his factor number 4. Meanwhile, in the front pack of cars, McLaughlin was contending down low for position number 4 as he'd work his way to the inside of Ricky Fuller. Couldn't muster up enough steam this time. Lap traffic would tell the story, but it was Richie Gallup to surprise the folks on the Modified Tour to take down his first victory. Hard work and determination had paid off for Richie Gallup. The NASCAR Modified Tour point standing still saw Jamie the Jet Tomeno leading with 24.32. Ricky Fuller was running in second. Tony Hirschman was third. The Reg was now up to fourth, and fifth was Mighty Mike Stefanik. 6th through 10th for the Modified Tour would see Satch Worley setting in the 6th spot. Doug Hebel on the 7th. George Kent would be in the 8th position. Mike Iwanitsko had dropped back to 9th, and Jeff Fuller was now setting in the 10th spot. Well, the home turf paid off for Richie Gallup. He took on the men of the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour and literally stole first place from a lot of them. And what about the Reg? Well, he didn't win at Riverside Park Speedway, but he certainly has been moving in. He now sets 4th in the point standings and is getting even closer. Well, next we'll be taking a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll take a look at the major fall events. Racing to be run at New Hampshire International Speedway, the Pocono International Raceway, and the Winston 300 from the Thompson Speedway. All of that and more right after this. Coming at you, the World Series of Asphalt Stock Car Racing. Daytona Speed Weeks 1991 from the New Smyrna Speedway. February 8th through 16th. 9 exciting nights of competition. The fastest, most exciting half mile in the country, offering several divisions of competition. The real excitement of the NASCAR Tour Type Modifieds with top New England drivers, plus mini modifieds, limited late models, and much, much more. Plus ASA All-Pro drivers, Midwest versus the South. Only at the New Smyrna Speedway, February 8th through 16th.
Racing is more fun when you know the inside story. Stock Car Racing magazine takes you behind the scenes. Action from super speedways to America's short tracks. Award-winning Stock Car Racing magazine. Colorful, exciting stories by the men who build and drive the cars. Call 1-800-441-3636 for a full year at only $14.97. Get a free racing patch with your paid subscription. Order now. Have your credit card ready and call 1-800-441-3636. Stock Car Racing magazine.
Your New England Sports Network has another great lineup of college basketball excitement on Saturday. The action tips off live at 2 o'clock with a Big 8 battle you won't want to miss. The high-flying Kansas Jayhawks take to the court against the always tough Cyclones of Iowa State. At 4 o'clock, the first of 3 straight live Pac-10 conference matchups when the Beavers from Oregon State travel to Palo Alto, California to take on the Stanford Cardinals. And next, get ready for a Washington, Arizona doubleheader. The Huskies and the Wildcats collide at 6 o'clock, followed by a clash of the state schools when the Cougars and the Sun Devils go at it at 8 o'clock. There's plenty of hoop thrills to go. The Seton Hall Pirates battle with their Big East rivals, the St. John's Redmen, at 10 o'clock, followed by an SMU Mustang Texas Tech showdown at midnight. The best lineup of college basketball action is right here on your New England Sports Network Saturday.
Welcome back to Race Week. There's no question about it. Jamie the Jet Tomeno is still doing an impressive job of holding on to the number 1 spot. And Ricky Fuller is there as a factor, no doubt about it. Tony Hirschman isn't far behind, and now Ruggiero and Stefanik are also moving in. Well, the story is not going to be short tracks now. It's going to be super speedways. The New Hampshire International Speedway is the next stop for the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour. Now, remember, all the drivers, including Tomeno, the point leader, with Hirschman, Stefanik, and Ruggiero, and the Fuller brothers all have experience on the super speedway. We'll see if the super speedway experience will pay off at the new New Hampshire International Speedway. The new super speedway of the North was finally complete, and the NASCAR Modified Tour would take this facility like a storm. It was veteran driver George Kent starting right up front on the inside. Outside of him, defending champion of the Modified Tour, Mighty Mike Stefanik. As the field would go to green, the Hunter power beneath the hood of car number 15 would decide who would lead the first lap of the competition. But not far behind was George Kent, and moving it as a factor was car number 8 for Jeff Fuller. The front three cars would string it out just a bit. Then it was Jeff Fuller who'd make a bold, aggressive move to the inside. Mighty Mike Stefanik would run strong in the outside lane, and Jamie the Jet was not far behind with car number 2. As they diced it up in the turns, it was Stefanik who'd take it back once again. Jeff Fuller would have to settle then for position number 2. But not far behind, the Jet was on a roll with Satch Worley, and drafting would start to take its toll for the Modifieds for the very first time. It was the Jet who'd make the inside lane work for him as he moved to the bottom side of the racetrack. The battle was now on for position number 2, and one slip would move George Kent back in as a factor. Mike McLaughlin was also there. He'd take a peek at the inside, nose in, and then move along by. Drafting was now the story, and the Modifieds were looking more like Winston Cup machines as they were setting the pace at aggressive speed. It was Stefanik who was now back to second, but Mike McLaughlin was now moved to the front of the class. His crew was excited in anticipation of another victory, but Mike Stefanik would give him a run for the money. It was a battle of the Mikes, lap after lap, inch by inch, the story was being told. Only one man would set in the winner's circle, and McLaughlin was looking like that man as he had now moved to the front of the class. Jimmy the Jet Tomato and Jeff Fuller were battling for the third spot. As they were duking it out, Jeff Fuller was almost in trouble, but he gathered it back nicely, and Satch Worley and the Reds were not far behind. But the battle again was between the two Mikes, as it was Mike McLaughlin who'd be the driving force at the front of the field. Closing laps would tell the story as Mike McLaughlin would set in the winner's circle. A big payday after winning in the Busch Grand Nationals and on the Modified Tour.
I never believed in that magic shoes, but there's something going our way this weekend. I'll tell you, this is unbelievable. This has got to be the best weekend I've ever had in my career. Unbelievable. I just used it to my advantage. Once I got up front, I knew what I had to do, and that was use up the racetrack, and that's what we did.
It was a time for the traditional major fall events. The R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company Winston 300 kind of kicked things off at the Thompson International Speedway. And Mike McLaughlin, well, he was sizzling with car number 12, and he'd be starting right up front of the competition. Mike Stefanik would be on the outside, a repeat view of what happened just a week or so ago at New Hampshire International Speedway. But when the field went to green, it was McLaughlin in command. Stefanik would climb. Mike Iwanitzko would drop back on the inside as it was Hirschman who'd settled for position number 3 for a while. Then it was Iwanitzko who would battle back towards the front of the field. Jamie the Jet Tomato would get out of shape just a bit as car number U2 would lose several positions. But this event was 300 laps and a long way to go. Ricky Fuller would spin all by himself to bring out a caution so he could get to the pits. It was Mike Iwanitzko who was still battling for position number 1, but Mike McLaughlin was the star of this show. It was Mighty Mike Stefanik who was also on a roll on the outside. Pronyne was running strong when down the back straightaway George Kent would have a tough day and go spinning with a cut tire on car number 21. Then it was the Reds. The Race for Life machine would also have a right rear tire go down. Mighty Mike Stefanik would slam the wall hard with car number 15, ending his hopes of securing perhaps a second title. It was Mike McLaughlin still in command. Hirschman was running in second, and Doug Walcott surprised a lot of folks as he worked his way among the top 5 cars as the leading rookie. Bruce D'Alessandro would then cut a tire with car number 123, and Doug Heveron would slam the wall slightly to get a pair of white balls on car number 3. It was then car number 69 for Mikey Iwanitzko would have a right front tire go soft as George Bunholzer would come down through the center of the infield and do a little sweeping of his own with car number 28 while contending for 5th. Back down on pit road, the pit crew was showing their stuff on the Coors Extra Gold machine, and McLaughlin was on a roll to get back to the front of the field. It was Hirschman who was running strong, but Satch Worley was the leader of the event as he was trying to take down a major victory at the Thompson Speedway. It was McLaughlin who had reeled him in. Closing stages of the event, Satch Worley was the leader, but the big question was for how long. The fans were loving it, on the edge of their seats in anticipation. But it was car number 12 who was now in command. Lapped automobile Rusty Ball to the inside as McLaughlin would take over the lead. Satch Worley had to settle for second, but he would try to fight back. The Winston 300 would soon be history, and Mike McLaughlin had done it once again. In less than 2 weeks, Mike McLaughlin had earned more than $30,000 on the Modified Tour. Joe Gerber's prestigious Sunoco Race of Champions was up next at the Pocono International Raceway. It was George Catt and Jan Leedy making up the front row. Ideal weather conditions? Well, not exactly. But when the field went to green, it was Leedy who muscled up a lot of steam on the outside of George Catt. The two would battle right from the start. But further back in the field, things were already getting shuffled up. But it was Jan Leedy in command when suddenly car number 69, Mikey Winitsko, would drop out of the competition with a clutch problem. He was out of the event early. Satch Worley would spin down the back straightaway with car number 4 as Tom Bowles and the rest of the field would somehow manage to scramble by. Then it was Hirschman and the Reg who were battling for second. The Reg would make the bold, aggressive move to the inside to pick up the spot. Leedy was in command. Then, as George Catt was coming back to the front of the field, he'd literally get up on top of Satch Worley. Now it was the Reg in command as Leedy would drop back to second. Mighty Mike Stefanik was looking for only one position on this day, and that was position number 1. Jan Leedy was now setting in the 3rd spot. Jeff Fuller and Tom Baldwin were running 4th and 5th. But it was the Reg in the Race for Life machine for a while until Mighty Mike would take over position number 1. Stefanik was now in command of the event. The Reg was trying to hunt him down when Hirschman would slam the wall hard with car number 1. For the second time, just as Hirschman was moving in on the point championship, misfortune would strike. But the race was now a race out of the pit area. Jeff Fuller would do it on the outside. Mike Stefanik would lose a position or so. But there was still a long way to go in this event. Back down the back straightaway, Jeff Fuller would lead the charge as they would thread the needle to get to the front of the field. But it was Tom Baldwin in command. The Reds would try it on the bottom. No room this time, as he'd lose a couple of spots. Mike McLaughlin and Jan Leedy were now among the top 5 cars. Heavy pit strategy would be the story, and Tom Baldwin, the leader, had suddenly pitted. It was Jamie the Jet Tomeno now in command. The Nestle Crunch machine was the leader when the Reds would cut a tire and literally stop to the outside of the racetrack. This would become the most controversial call for 44 racing. The NASCAR officials would then hold car number 44 in the pit. Mario Fiore and the crew were not pleased. Their day and hopes of victory had suddenly ended. It was Mighty Mike Stefanik who would now muster enough steam on the inside to take over position number 1. Once in command, it was Stefanik who swung it out at the front of the field who would secure the impressive Race of Champions victory. It was an $18,000 victory in the mountains of Pocono for Mike Stefanik. Mike McLaughlin has shown that super speedway experience does pay off as he secures a big victory at New Hampshire International Speedway. But what about Mike Stefanik? Well, with his victory at the Pocono International Raceway, he's moving in. He sets in second. Jamie the Jet Tomeno is still holding on for the lead. And believe you me, Tomeno is watching out because Stefanik is getting closer in search of that second title. Well, next we'll be taking a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll be taking a look at who will be the champion of the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour. Coming at you, the World Series of Asphalt Stock Car Racing, Daytona Speedweek 1991 from the New Smyrna Speedway, February 8th through 16th. 9 exciting nights of competition. The fastest, most exciting half mile in the country, offering several divisions of competition. The real excitement of the NASCAR Tour Type Modifieds with top New England drivers, plus mini modifieds, limited late models, and much, much more. Plus ASA All-Pro drivers, Midwest versus the South. Only at the New Smyrna Speedway, February 8th through 16th. Welcome back to Race Week. Well, Mike Stefanik has 4 victories on the NASCAR Modified Tour. Remember, Tomeno only has 1, but consistency has paid off. It seems like Tomeno's gotten all the right breaks as he looks at the final 3 events. Now, those events are at the Stafford Motor Speedway, which is Mike Stefanik's strongest home turf, then the Thompson International Speedway, which is Reggie Ruggieri's old stomping ground, and then, of course, the Martinsville Speedway in Martinsville, Virginia, where guess who? The Jet Jamie Tomeno has set in victory lane back before the Modified Tour even was established. Let's see what's going to happen as we move to the final events and who'll become the champion of the NASCAR Modified Tour. It was a New England tradition, the Coca-Cola Fall Finals from the Stafford Motor Speedway. But the controversy that surrounded this event started right before the field went to green. Reggie Ruggiero would not be driving the familiar 44, but the close number 6.
I needed a car to drive for the remainder of the Modified Tour. My car owner, Mauro Fiore, decided to sit out the remainder of the season because he had a little, discrepancy with the NASCAR officials poking out. So I needed something to drive. I'm up there in points. I'm 5th, but I'm only 21 out of 2nd and 150 or something out of 1st. So we're right there still, and I think that I possibly got a shot to win this championship, and I'll do anything I can to win it. So here I am in a red number 6.
The field was ready, and red cars would be starting right up front. It was car number 8 for Jeff Fuller, and the reg in that number 6, the Ed Close machine. When the field went to green, Jeff Fuller was in command. Reggie Ruggiero was hunting him down, and Sat Woolley was again a factor to the outside of Mike McLaughlin. But it was Jeff Fuller in command. McLaughlin had now snuck his way into position number 2. George Brunhutzel and Larry Moore got locked together down the front straightaway. And suddenly there was more havoc. Danny Watts would hit the right front of the Larry Moore number 63. Back towards the front of the field, Jeff Fuller was still in command. McLaughlin was hung out to dry on the outside as the reg was fighting back. Then Ricky Fuller showed a little aggression as Tony Hirschman would go around with car number 1. No real damage done here. Hirschman would soon get back into the hunt. The story was a mandatory pit stop as car number 6 had snuck by the number 8 of Jeff Fuller. The reg would lead the charge back to the pits. Who'd be the quickest out of the pit area? The best team would win. Ricky Fuller, Mike Stefanik, and then brother Jeff, as they would head back out and rejoin in the competition here. It was Brian Schofield who took the lead, but it was short-lived as Ricky Fuller was now in command. Not far behind was mighty Mike Stefanik. Jeff Fuller was on a roll when car number 77, Ricky Fuller, was back in the pit area. McLaughlin was back in, and a right front tire flat on the reg with car number 66. It was mighty Mike Stefanik who would hold on to dominate the racing action. With 2 races left on the NASCAR Modified Tour, the final New England appearance, Jamie the Jet Tomeno had a minimum point lead going into the final 2 major events.
Well, so far everything's gone my way. Mike had a couple of bad races where he didn't finish. It wasn't under his control. He didn't finish the races and stuff. And he's a tough competitor. He's a champ, and I got these 2 races to finish good. If I can keep him in my sight, I think I can do it. But I can't let him out of my sight.
Well, yeah, we thought we had a good cushion last year going into Martinsville with a 95-point lead. We saw what happened to that, so it's not over till it's over. We're just taking them one at a time, and I'm very relaxed and just going to take it, just run hard, try to win.
The World Series was about to go to green. It was Jeff Fuller and Tom Baldwin making up the front row. Mighty Mike Stefanik and Rick Fuller would make up row number 2. Now, this would be the shortest distance race on the Modified Tour. Only 75 laps, and there was a lot of pressure already being applied. Down the back straightaway, Reggie Ruggiero would have a problem in spin with car number 6. Then suddenly a mix-up. Jamie the Jet Tomeno was involved. Tony Hirschman and George Brunhutzel. Remember, for Hirschman and Tomeno, the story was the points in this event. Both these competitors would try to get back into the thick of things. But right now, the battle was on for second. Ricky Fuller had moved into second. Mikey Winitsko had muscled up enough steam on the inside as mighty Mike Stefanik had now dropped back yet another position. Sat Woolley and Richie Gallup had worked among the top 5 cars now when Mike Stefanik would cut a right rear tire on car number 15 at the entrance to pit road. Back down on pit road, Tony Hirschman's car was steaming away as George Brunhutzel would return to the competition. Mighty Mike Stefanik and the Jet were battling not only for position, but the points. Stefanik had worked his way in, and he was now among the top 5 cars. Tom Baldwin was again a factor with car number 7. But it was Jeff Fuller and Mike Stefanik who were duking it out, inch by inch to the checker. It was Jeff Fuller to the winner's circle. This was Jeff Fuller's 3rd victory of 1990.
I think I was the only car that was able to stick down low in 3 and 4 during the whole race. And I knew we were going to have contact, but it's just one of them deals where, coming down for the checkered flag, short track race, and you got to expect the unexpected. And, you had it.
Just both threw it in there and come together pretty good. Both got good and sideways and just had the nice 4-wheel slide out of 4, drag race to start finish line. He beat me by a nose.
The modified title would be determined at the Martinsville Speedway in Martinsville, Virginia. For Jamie the Jet Tomeno, all he had to do was start the event. But for Mike Stefanik, a victory would be so sweet.
Yeah, well, once we know there's 2 cars out of this race, my crew's going to inform me. You might see a little bit of driving difference on myself. I can take a couple of chances where everybody's been pushing me around and leaning on me. Well, it might be just the opposite this time.
The stage was set. This was the final hour for the competition. From the Martinsville Speedway right from the start, it was Tony Hirschman and mighty Mike Stefanik setting right up front in the competition here. It was Mike Stefanik who took over the early lead and would start to pull away from the field. Suddenly down the back straightaway, Jeff Fuller with some help would have the throttle stick. He would slam the wall hard. Jeff Fuller, who runs so well at the Martinsville Speedway, would be out at the very start of the final event of 1990. All Fuller and his team could think about now was the long winter ahead and preparing for a title in 1991. But it was Tony Hirschman who was now the leader of this event. He would set the pace as Mike Stefanik would start to move in down underneath George von Hutzel. Not far behind, the Jet was on a roll, showing that aggression that he had talked about. Satsworley got out of shape and bobbled just a bit, just in front of Tony Ferrante in the former Mike McLaughlin machine. It was Reggie Ruggiero now in command for a while, as Hirschman had started to reel him back in to get back to the front of the field. And Mike Stefanik, he again would have no luck at Martinsville, as the overheating number 15 would sideline him early from the competition. It was still Tony Hirschman who dominated the racing action to take down the final event of the 1990 season. And for Jamie the Jet Tomato and Danny Ust, their dream of becoming the champion of a Modified Tour had come true. Jamie the Jet Tomato had won the title with 33.82 over Mike Stefanik, Rick Fuller, Satsworley, and Tony Hirschman. 6th through 10th, the Reds, followed by George Kent, Doug Everon, Tom Bowman, and Jeff Fuller. Hirschman was able to pull it off for the Winston Classic from the Martinsville Speedway. 4 victories in 1990 is nothing to sneeze at on the NASCAR Modified Tour. And what about mighty Mike Stefanik? He's got 5 victories. He, too, was impressive. But the man that led from the second race of the season right to the most important last event of 1990 was Jamie the Jet Tomato. Congratulations to him and his crew for an impressive 1990 season. They will truly become great champions of the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour. Well, that's going to kind of wrap things up for this edition of Race Week. On the next edition of Race Week, we'll bring you behind the scenes to the banquet for the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour in Springfield, Massachusetts. We'll talk with the champion, the crew, the owner, and much, much more. We'll take a look at the schedule for up-and-coming events for 1991 NASCAR Modified Tour. Until then, we say take care, and we'll see you again next time for the best in motorsports.